Ka pai, morena tātou. Again, thank you all for joining us for this kaupapa hira hira. We're so excited to be running our 4th Learning Bite all about colonization and kai. And I'll talk a little bit more about that kaupapa in a second. I'll start us off with karakia. Nō reira me inui tātou. Nā io matua ko rangi nui rawa ko papatua nuku nā rawa a tāne mahuta a tangaroa a tāwhiri mātia me era atu nā rātau ko hine ahuone, nāna ka puta te ira tangata ki te whaiau ki te ao marama, whitiora kia rangi e tui honei, whitiora kia papa e takoto ake nei, ti hei mauri ora ki te tai au e whakātu mai nei, hei ako, hei tohu, hei manaki, whakamaua kia ita, kia tina, kia toa, hui e, tai ki e. Nō reira, morena tātou. Nau mai, whakatau mai ki wainganui a tātou. We're super excited for this kaupapa today. And today is all about decolonizing our kai. Dr. Jessica gave us this epic title that I'll read to you, The Death of Colonial Capitalist Patriarchy and the Rise of New Indigenous Worlds, which is a lot cooler of a title than the one I originally gave this. So we're joined by the legendary Dr. Jessica Hutchings, and together we're going to explore how agricultural colonization disrupts traditional kai systems and our ability and practice to reimagine and recreate our food systems, which is a pretty exciting kaupapa to be speaking to today. Nō reira, Kōwae, I should probably introduce myself. Ko aroha nui West tōku ingoa, huru tēnei no te aroa whānui, no tūhaurangi no Ngāti Whakauē, no Ngāti Rangiwewehi, no Ngāti Awa, Ngai Tūhoi, and kind of here and there and everywhere, but raised here in Rotorua, Te Takere Nui o Te Waka o Te Aroa. So lovely to join you all this morning. And I'm going to read a quick bio for Dr. Jessica Hutchings before I pass it over to her, although I believe she needs no introduction. And if you are here learning about kai sovereignty, then you have definitely heard her name. So Dr. Jessica Hutchings hails from the mighty Ngaitahu, Ngāti Huirapa and Gujarati, and is nationally and internationally recognised as a leader and researcher in Indigenous food systems and Māori food and soil sovereignty. She's a founding trustee of the Papa Whakarito Charitable Trust that works to uplift Indigenous seed, soil and food sovereignty in Hua Parakore through research, development and community practice. She lives on 12 acres and is a Hua Parakore verified family food grower. She's been a member of Te Waka Kaiora, the Māori Organics Authority, for the last 2 decades. Jessica is also a widely published author, including recent books Pātaka Kai, Te Mahi One One, a Māori Soil Sovereignty and Wellbeing Handbook. Dr. Hutchings has been working at the crossroads of Indigenous knowledge and environmental wellbeing for the last 3 decades and is passionate about Indigenous social justice, organic farming and self-determination. She was named as a finalist in 2023 for the New Zealander of the Year in the Environment category, as well as being named one of New Zealand's top 50 influential women in food and drink. Nō reira, tēnā koe, Dr. Jessica.
Tēnā koe aroha nui, e mihi ana ki a koe nau I tūwhera tuhui nei, nōku te whiwhi ki te hara mai kei wainga nui I ngā pukunga o Parakore o te mahi hei whakatipu kai, ka kitea koutou kanohi a tahua I tēnei rā, e mihi ana ki a koutou. Ai, ka tapiri atu ko ngai tūhoi hoki I te taha o tāku pāpā, I roto I tāku whakapapa. Nō reira tēnā koutou katoa. Ai.
Kia ora. And we're also joined by the lovely Matt Perryman, and I'll get you to introduce yourself, Matt, and then you can open us up into our learning bite and we can get started.
Ka pai ngā whihi, aroha nui, and lovely to have you here, Whai Jessica. Thank you so much for being with us. Kia ora tātou nā mai haere mai ki tēnei wānanga. Ko Ngāti Awa tuku iwi, ko ngai taumara tuku hapu, ko Matt Perryman aho. My name's Matt, I work on our Parakore programs. This time around, I actually won't be speaking very much. I'll leave most of the kōrero to Whai Jessica, who we're so lucky to have here. I'll just be sharing the presentation and tautoko as needed. But just to introduce the learning bite, I'll start sharing that now. Is that showing up all good? Yep, cool. Awesome. So
We
Yeah.
can see your links up the top. I don't know if that matters for anyone else, but I don't know if you can change that either, but just a note. And also, just before Matt takes us through this, just remembering everyone that to turn your mics off when you're not speaking, but we do encourage engagement on this wānanga, so jump in the chat and yeah, and we will have a section towards the end for Q&A, so I'll try and make sure that your questions get answered. Tēnā tātou.
Kōwae, and Aroha, I'm not sure how to get rid of the URL at the top. I think it's just how it's going to go today, but all good. So this learning bite today is about decolonizing our Kai systems. And in Aotearoa and throughout the world, our relationships with Kai have been deeply shaped by colonization since its arrival here. The impacts are profound, but reclaiming traditional Kai practices is not only possible, it's essential to address the Kai climate and energy crises. This learning bite is going to look at the relationship between colonization and Kai and how Māori have adapted and resisted through food. You'll learn about the resilience of Mātauranga Māori and reflect on how reclaiming traditional Kai practices supports mana motuhake and our collective health and well-being today. So I'm just going to show a couple of pictures and then we'll pass over to Jessica. Here's an awesome few images here of what Kai was like. Our Kai systems were like before and even after colonization for a bit. We were thriving, we had abundance, we were growing so much Kai, we were preserving it and storing it in our traditional ways that we'd learned from our local taiao. We had pātaka Kai, we had all of these beautiful feasts because we had such abundance. And Kai was how we managed our relationships across the motu between our communities and within our communities too. So here's just a few beautiful pics to remind us of what we have in our past, in our whakapapa, and what we can also return to. Here we're just talking about our Kai systems of our tupuna, and I might just pass over to Jessica as the expert on Kai systems to have a kōrero here.
Ai, kia ora, Matt. Ai, pai ana. So we're always drawing from research that when we speak from the kind of the standpoint of Papa Whakarito Trust, and when we think about our Kai systems of our tupuna, first of all, one of the things that we've learned through the Kaupapa Māori research that we've done is that Kai is whanaunga. So it is inextricably linked to our whakapapa, not as it only whanaunga in the objects and the Kai that it produces, but it's whanaunga in the terms that it sits within our cultural landscapes of our atua. So there's this interconnection between Kai and our whakapapa and the notion of Kai being our whanaunga. I'm going to talk about balance and reciprocity a bit further on in the kōrero, but kaitiakitanga was something that our people learnt when they came to Aotearoa. You know, they came from very different climates, and it was definitely a method of trial and error from what we've learnt from talking with other people around the motu. But we worked in a way where there was still a tauretetanga held between people and the land, between tangata and whenua. And one of the things that I'll talk about a little bit later on this morning is the impact that colonial capitalist patriarchy has had on severing and fracturing that tauretetanga, or that balance between manatane and manawahine in particular, because we have the death of the ecological feminine mind and the impact on manawahine from colonisation, which utterly impacted on that balance that we held, the role that manawahine held in particularly in regards to the balance between people and nature. We know that our food systems of our tupuna, and even today as Māori communities are standing up food systems in their rohi, that they're based on local tikanga, they're hapu-led, they're whānau-led, but most importantly, they're at place, so they're localised. And of course, our food systems hold all of the kaupapa in our beautiful ao Māori world. And while we've got mana Māori and Wairua up there, we could add in the other three who are parakore kaupapa in there, Māramatanga, Te Aoturoa, and Māramatanga and Te Aoturoa. We'll just say 5, but there's 6. And whakapapa. I am whakapapa. So, you know, in order to move forward, we have a lot of whakatauki that tell us that we need to look back into our past in order to understand what we need to pull forward. So very much when I think about rebuilding our food systems for today, are food systems that are based on the systems and the kaupapa and the tikanga of our tupuna. Ka pai, maybe next slide, Matt. Happy to pass back to you, Matt.
Yeah, these are just a couple of pictures of some of our whānau Ngā tupuna doing harvesting kumara. And kumara was one of those crops that was absolutely staple, and it was passed between our communities. So this is just a photo to illustrate the abundance as well. Same here with this auntie drying eels on the racks. Awesome here, the patakatuna. I'll pass back to you for this one, Fire.
Okay, ka pai. Just take a breath, because this week on Monday I gave evidence at the Waitangi Tribunal in the Manawahine hearings, after listening to Tory whānau and other wahine talk about the hara and the harms that they experience as wahine Māori in doing the political decolonising work that they do. And I just lay that out for a context, because I want us to think about our kai systems as being connected to the wider movements, that wider mana motuhake movements and the rangatiratanga movements, so that we're not isolating and separating kai as separate from all of the other rangatiratanga work that is happening across our communities. So when colonialism arrived in Aotearoa, and maybe if we just start actually back from there, and maybe, Matt, can I just have the slide off, because it's distracting me, makes me want to speak to words. Kia ora, that's much better, thank you. So, you know, before capitalism arrived here, we had this really long, like if we think of this as te ao Māori, and this as the big long time frame of which our tupuna were here for, you know, they were here for thousands of years, and they arrived in Aotearoa with this knowledge system that had been built up and living in really close association, but tauretitanga, in a balance with the taio and with the environment. So that is thousands and thousands of years old of intergenerational unbroken connection of knowledge transmission, where mana wahine and Māori women, and I'm really underscoring this because it's really at the forefront of the tribunal hearings and the kōrero that women are sharing this week in Wellington in this claim. And it was great for me to have the opportunity to put food into the claim and to put it into the claim in the standpoint from mana wahine. But if we think about those thousands of years of which unbroken intergenerational knowledge around how we lived in balance with our taio was in place before colonisers arrived, before settler colonialism came in Aotearoa. And then we had colonisation came, and it came over top of all of our worldviews, of all of our lived experience, and it subjugated and it suppressed and it fractured and it marginalised and it wiped out this ecological balance and this relationship that we had with the environment for thousands and thousands of years. That meant that our environment was a place where we could eat from our cultural landscapes, where that was our first original food sovereignty. And so what that meant was that was the suppression and the death of what's called in Western Europe, you know, and this happened not only in New Zealand, but if we think about the burning of tens of thousands of women, of witches, at the stake in Europe, it's the actual same experience. It's the death of the feminine ecological mind. And what we had through colonisation was we had the separation of people from nature. We had the placement of man, or the patriarchy, over nature. So all of a sudden, we're not part of nature. We're standing back from nature and we're looking at her. Remember, she's been feminized by, you know, the thinkers of the Enlightenment, Bacon and Descartes. And one of the early quotes of Descartes, you know, goes along the lines of nature is a wild beast. We must ride and tame her. You know, we must contain her. And so when you have this change and this order, then we have a broken food system. Then we have a dislocated relationship with the environment. And, you know, we can say, well, colonisation did this and it did that, but it broke our natural order of how we live in the world. And it broke this order that for us as Indigenous people, we had had for thousands of years, that our ancestors travelled across Te Moana Nui a Kiwa to Aotearoa and carried intact this tauritianga, or this balance. And so the impact of colonisation in Aotearoa is very short-lived. You know, here we have these thousands of years, and then we have this little time period of 250 years in Kataka. You know, Kataka te taurititanga o te taia, te taurititanga mai i ngā tangata ki te whenua, te taurititanga kei wainga nui i ngā manatāne, me ngā mana wahine, me ngā takatāpui hoki. And we had the rise of a new colonial order in terms of how we related to the environment. So when I think about colonisation, I also too add in two other words. I talk about patriarchal colonisation, so that we don't just invisibilise the absolute rise of patriarchy, and we can see that now. We can see that right now with the extractive logics of capitalism, and this is the other word I add into colonisation, it's capitalism. So we never forget that colonisation brought these extractive logics, which all that means is the continual taking. Mother Nature, Papa Tuanuku, is there for us to take from. And capitalism is built on that logic. And so we can't actually find a fix for our food systems, from my standpoint, within those capitalist, patriarchal, colonial ideologies, all those logics. So, you know, 250 years ago, we had the suppression of mana wahine, of this taurititanga. We had this rise of capitalist patriarchy and these logics, and we had the absolute death and destruction of our food systems. So New Zealand, Aotearoa, has one of the highest rates of deforestation anywhere in the world, which people find hard to believe, but given the size of our landmass. And when we had that, we had the severing or the breaking of our first food sovereignty, which is, of course, our ngāhere, our moana, and our awa. We know this. But what we also too had in the early days of colonisation leading on from that deforestation was we had the planting of grasslands in Aotearoa. So our mindset changed straight away on our landscapes to go back and to feed the motherland. Our food sovereignty was destroyed through deforestation, and it was replaced with grasslands and the running of sheep and beef to be exported right back in the 1800s. Settler colonialism was doing this, exporting our best soil microbes, our clean water, our beautiful air off to the motherland. So this notion of New Zealand being an export-led economy to feed the motherland, which we see every day in New Zealand, you know, produce enough food every year to feed 60 million people, can't feed the 5 million people in our country. But this mentality has been built into our society ever since settler colonialism arrived in New Zealand, and reinforced every week on a Sunday night at 7 o'clock through Country Calendar, the longest running show in New Zealand television history. There's a reason for that. Just have to pull back, you know, and do some critique around why is Country Calendar do so well and get the funding, because it perpetuates a narrative and makes us accept the narrative as a society, the role of media, to be able to accept these rolling green hills. I mean, I can even hear the bloody tune of Country Calendar in my head. It's like we're all happy as we're rolling over these green hills. Anyway, agricultural colonisation in the everyday requires us to eat what I describe as whiteness on our plate. So that's the whiteness in the refined flours and the refined sugars, the crinkly, rustling papers, nutrient-empty food. And so a lot of the work that Te Waka Kaiora is doing, Papa Whakarito, Parakore, mihi ana kia koutou, Parakore's doing, Iwi and Hapu are doing, is to look for ways to rebalance, to find again that taurititanga between tangata and whenua, between mana wahine and manatāne, mana takatāpui hoki, to be able to stand up new Indigenous food, seed and soil worlds. And I say this because, you know, and I titled this talk, The Death of Colonial Capitalist Patriarchy. And it really is a death. And I think it really is kind of our role to aki that death along, to be the death doula, to be able to help give expression and language and words to this death that we are living in right now, is unusual for me and it's strange. It feels uncomfortable. Some days we're really flat and down about it. We wonder if the work that we're doing is making any difference. I know I won't see the whole death and collapse and the rise of the new worlds in my lifetime because it's a slow, it's like the death throes, it's slow. It's also to, I talk about it as the death of colonial capitalist patriarchy, but I also to see it as the end of modernity, and that's a painful thing to watch as well. So when when the false promises of what modernity could deliver are not delivered on, and we see it all crumble before us without the system, the colonial capitalist patriarchal system, or any system that has decision-making power being able to stand anything else up, then we know that this is where we have to step in as communities. And this is why the death of colonial capitalist patriarchy, although it's painful, is not necessarily a bad thing. It's like, bring it on, peak oil, bring it on. But it's painful, right? Because every day we've got kids to drop off at school and we're still stuck in that system of oil. I really wished peak oil to happen 20 years ago, and now we can kind of see it happening. I'm not quite sure that we are ready for it. So, let's let that die, tira, just leave that over to that side. I think being able to find language to encourage it along, thinking about what your work as a death doula in the capitalist patriarchy is, so that you can language it and so that we can talk about it. I really believe in the power of manifestation and vibration. So if we keep talking about it, we actually create a vibration where we can encourage it along to do its thing. It feels like it's really thrashing about in a very violent way at the moment, and it's really impacting on women and children in Indigenous communities, especially in places like Gaza, Ukraine, the Middle East. It's always women and it's always children and it's always our taiao that bear the brunt of this. So the death throes I really want to acknowledge are really painful, and we can feel very lonely in those times. And I think it's really important as a community that we acknowledge that, because not only is food sovereignty about our sovereignty over our food, but it's also too about community sovereignty, so that we can connect up and do this work across all of these tiles on the screen and not feel like that we are these islands trying to save the food systems by ourselves. So we're dueling death, we're dueling the capitalist patriarchy. And while we're doing that, I wouldn't put too much effort into that. I don't know, 5-10% if we have to some days, if we've got the energy for it. But then on the other side of that is the standing up of these new Indigenous food worlds. And this is the work that really makes my heart sing, and I suppose keeps us in this space for so long, is the ability that we have to be able to work with our Indigenous foodways as places of hope and transformation for a mātiki mai future, for a transformational constitutional future where we are tending to Hini Ahawani and deepening our relationship with her, where we're growing amazing good soil, where we understand and have brought back the whakapapa names to our soil, where our Indigenous senses are revived so much we can smell the soil and know if it's aerobic or anaerobic, and have this experience of hauora and connection via our divine Indigenous senses. So we're not coming back into Western science paradigms to validate our own pūtaia or our own mana wahine, mana tāne, mana takatapui ways of knowing. These new Indigenous food worlds where we are, as Māori women, saving seeds again and enacting seed sovereignty. And I just always have to put a plug in for seed sovereignty, because we're really not doing enough in Aotearoa as Māori in this space. And I say that based on the international work and the experiences that we've had to go and visit other Indigenous women in their seed banks in other parts of the world, where, this is decentralised work, so that's the first thing. We don't need a government to come in and to coordinate a seed bank. We have a national seed bank collection in Aotearoa that's run by our CRIs. When I talk to Wahine, Aroha Mead and Melmark Shadbolt, who have been into those seed banks, they literally wept. Our seeds are being cared for without reverence. They're literally, as they described to me, are in a metal filing cabinet, no clear labelling, all kind of sitting on top of one another. There's no aroha, munga kākono. And so this is why the work of looking after our seeds needs to come back into the loving hands of Māori women and Māori communities to do this work. And I want to share with you one of the learnings that came out of a wānanga we had 3 weeks ago, a Manawahine Seed Sovereignty wānanga in Pōneke, with about, I think we invited maybe about 25 wahine Māori who've been involved in kai seed and soil, but also too from the standpoint of being toi Māori, ringa toi, so artists, filmmakers, you know, just bringing diverse people into the room beyond those of us who are ringa raupa in the mara and in the seed world doing this stuff. But one of the things we talked about was and it's been a question that's really been in my mind for a very long time, having seen, you know, New Zealand's National Heritage Seed Collection being in a seed bank, you know, having to buy heritage seeds, all of, you know, these types of things. I'm trying to be kind and not name people or places. But ki aunei, kei te he tērā, you know, I hara tētahi wahine Pākehā te mana ki te tiaki ngā kākano Māori, o te ao o Aotearoa, e kau. Ko te mahi o tātou ki te mahi a tērā. And so really, we had a conversation at Swananga about this notion of a seed bank and how a seed bank is not really going to, you know, this notion of a bank is this logic of capitalism anyway. It's like we're stashing something away. Whereas we really came to use the language of seed sharing every day, like seed sharing as an act of resistance to capitalist colonial patriarchy in our everyday. So one of the things we've learned about kai sovereignty is that kai sovereignty requires us to have an everyday connection with the mara, whether or not we're out there doing heaps of mahi or we're just going for a little wander with our cup of tea in the morning. Doesn't really matter. It's just about having that everyday relationship and connection with the mara. And it's good to go for a wander in the morning with your cup of tea because then you can see what you're going to eat for dinner. And, you know, we all know how quickly crops come to the absolute best and that if we miss that best time for harvest, damn it, you know, waited 6 to 8 weeks for that kai to grow and then you've missed it at its best point. So it is a good thing to get out there every day. But the same applies to seed sovereignty for Māori. And I think like changing the discourse up from let's have seed banks to actually let's share seeds every day. I've now got seeds in my handbag every day, little packets, just, you know, sharing them out every day. This is our resilience. And it's not about, because in my head, I've been thinking, well, we need to set up a Māori seed bank. We need to be looking after our own seeds and we need to bring them all back into one centralized place. And it's not to discredit that idea. I think that could be important and, you know, ia rohi, ia whānau, ia hapu, but actually being able to share them every day is our act of seed sovereignty. We can't wait for the postal service to be working when there's a crisis and we all of a sudden need to get hold of seeds. We need to learn how to do that ourselves. So the other thing that came out of the kōrero was that we don't all need to be good at everything around seeds. So we grow good hui, grow good kamo. We don't grow very good kumara, unfortunately, because it's too cold. But you guys will grow good kumara. Someone on the Zoom will grow good kumara. So you'll have good seeds that other people don't have. So I'll share my seeds with you, you know. So this is the everyday act that we need to start doing, and we need to not be replicating what Pākehā seed savers are doing and create our own pathways, our own whānikitanga, our own development for how we want to look after our seeds.
Can I ask a question from the chat?
Yes, and I'm keeping an eye on my time. Pai ana.
No, you're all good. So there's someone in the chat has said, as wahine Pākehā, but also authentic tangata tiriti, is there any room in this kaupapa for non-Māori wahine?
He pai tērā pātai e mihi ana ki a koe, i te tangata tiriti kei wainga i a tātou. Kei te hira te mahi o ngā tangata tiriti. So this is definitely not an exclusionary kōrero, but I am definitely prioritising and privileging and using the language of Well, first and foremost, in this week, mana wahine. So the role of tangata tiriti, I believe, is always to stand beside and walk behind so that Māori are leading, and so not to walk in front of the kaupapa, but to understand your place in alliedship is really important. To sit and to listen and to understand what local Māori communities are doing in your area and to understand your place and how you can help in that. And then the other thing that I always encourage tangata tiriti to do, and we've seen this in the mana motohaki movement from the 70s onwards, you know, even in Bastion Point, it was the Pākehās who put themselves on the front line. It was the top twins who put themselves on the front line and you know, so it's Pākehā need to get out front and take the heat because there's enough heat on us doing this work. So if there's opportunities for Pākehā to front Pākehā to kawea tēnei kōrero, e kawea tēnei whakaaro ki e tahi atu Pākehā, ka tukua, you know, dish it, serve it, send it, you know, share the kōrero. Because for Māori women, for Māori to be on the front line all the time doing this work is challenging and it's tiring. And also too, it's harmful. There's other things we want to do. We want to be working in the space of growing, developing the new worlds, but it doesn't mean that the whāwhais stop with the crown and capitalist colonial patriarchy. I also too just want to note last night the change in legislation that the government made to stop the torts case being led by Mike Smith against climate pollution. I've never seen any government anywhere in the world make an intervention to stop a person of civil society take a claim against corporates about their pollution. So really then as a democracy, we have nowhere to go in terms of our legal system to be able to call accountability. So instead of Māori speaking out about that, that's a really good example of where tangata tiriti could actually be taking the lead on that. Yeah. Ka pai. I just want to finish off because I want to leave some time. It's enough rabbiting on from me. I want to leave some time to have a whakawhiti kōrero, but I want to finish off by talking about the Mana Wahine Declaration for Seed and Soil, the Mana Wahine Declaration for Hini Ahone. And I think we're putting a link in the learning bites to that. It's up on the Papa Whakarito website. I invite you all, please, to have a look at it and please sign it online and share it as far as you can. This is a declaration that was co-written with Dr. Vandana Shiva, Joe Smith and Erin Matariki Carr in 2024 when we invited Dr. Shiva over to Aotearoa to come and inspire our communities around seed, soil and food sovereignty at the He Whenua Rongo Conference. And at that conference, we made a call for a declaration for our seeds and soil and for Hini Ahone. And Dr. Shiva had the idea that we should draft a declaration. So I was like, oh, that sounds good. And then, you know, 12 hours later, she's saying, okay, when are we doing it? Shall we do it? So we did it. And it was a mistress class in how to write a declaration and how to speak truth to power. And the power of being able to just put a paw in the ground outside of nation states and outside of corporate and government interests and needing to get anything agreed to, signed off or ratified. When nation states stop listening, as they have, as this government has, then we need to take the power into our own hands. And that's what the Mana Wahine Declaration for Seed and Soil does. It makes 6 clear actions, asking that soil and seed be honoured as the heart of biodiversity. It calls out the logics of capitalist, extractive, patriarchal colonisation. It also too notes that we are listening to Papa Tuanuku, that as Indigenous women, we are the closest at this time on earth to our Earth Mother. We're listening. We can hear the call. It also too calls for the end of the financialisation of nature. So we see this happening with biodiversity credits, with carbon credits. You know, it's crazy to me that you could pollute in a country, but then purchase biodiversity credits on a global market to restore flamingo habitats in another part of the world, but then, you know, that gives you license to pollute in somewhere else in the world. So this is the global financial order in which the world lives in which our environment lives in. So we call out and call for a stop to the ongoing financialization of nature. So if that resonates with you, please sign it. We're not taking it to Parliament. We're not asking anybody to recognise it, but there's a heartening in knowing that we are joining up across the movements and that we are all supporting each other on our kaupapa. And I think that is extremely important, because the politics of distraction right now are huge. And we're left, right, you know, just everywhere in response mode. But if we can actually say, well, we're coming together over this, or we're coming together over this, or we're coming together over this, then that creates power between us, creates trust, and it rebuilds what I believe is what's needed to stand up our new Indigenous foodways, and that's hapori, that's community, that's whanaungatanga, that's tūhonotanga, that's kotahitanga, ukaipotanga, manaakitanga. And so it provides a pathway for that. Now, I'm just going to stop, because I much prefer to have a kōrero, whakawhitiwhiti kōrero, and I could just go on for a long time. So it's good that I stopped looking at my notes. I think I've covered off the points that I wanted to. Yeah, hapai, kia koutou toa.
Tēnā koe, Dr. Jessica. How would you like to do this? Would you like people to unmute and talk, or would you like them to jump in the chat, or either or?
Unmute and talk's good.
Cool, ka pai. Tukuna te rākau kia koutou. Te hunga mā takitaki mai, tēnā koutou.
Oh. I'm going to break the ice and just say, kia ora, Jessica. It's so awesome having you with us here. I don't know if you remember me from the library in Rotorua last year. But yes, I definitely held on to when you visited this kaupapa around wahine Māori reclaiming seed and the practice of it, etc., etc. So I am based in Rotorua. If anybody wants to join that kaupapa here, you can get in touch with me or any of our other seed savers. There's quite a few of us. I'll leave it there. Kia ora.
If you feel nervous, you can put your question in the chat. I think people might be feeling a little bit starstruck, perhaps. That was, yeah, a really brilliant kōrero, so still absorbing some of that, hey? So if you prefer it and would rather chuck it in the chat, then I'm happy to read your pātai out, or your kōrero out.
Kia ora aroha nui. I'll just jump in here as well. And I'm just a bit nervous because I'm like, of course, someone's going to thank Jessica. Thank you, Jessica. But yeah, thank you so much for all the work you do and fueling the fire. So many of the things you said, especially finding the language to express the death state. My heart's just beating 100 miles an hour because it's so, I needed to hear that. So thank you. Sorry if I'm getting emotional, but I've written down so many things that you said as well, which are things that I'm still doing and now feel like, yeah, this is just keep doing it. Just keep doing it. Totally agree with support other kaupapa as well, because we do need to build our networks. Yeah, and I know I can't grow everything in the garden either, in the mara. So that's part of that networking. And, you know, I've taken some veggies over to my neighbours for a start off. It's, you know, it's just a little start, a little bit of parsley, a little bit of bits and pieces. But yeah, that's the starting point, you know. And yeah, just ngā mihi nui, kia koutou katoa, everyone who comes to these hui. Yeah, because together we can make some changes. So I don't know if I have any pātai because, yeah, like I said, everything that you've said, it's true of my heart. I've just looked up a couple of things that you mentioned as well, but shocked about the Mike Smith thing. So yeah, again, just good to to know and keep your fingers on the buttons. I have 5 sons ranging from ages 28 down to 8. And so that's my mahi, is to feed them and empower them. So yeah, ngā mihi nui.
He mihi ana, kia kōrua hoki ko rā, me pai ki te tūtaki i a koe anō. Yeah, thank you to both of you for your comments. 5 sons, eh? I've only got 1. Yeah, ka pai, he whaia. I've just language. We've just finished filming a podcast series called Seeding Hope, He Kākano Aho, and I see Nadine is on here, and she was one of our people that I had the privilege of interviewing in that podcast series. But I asked, and we interviewed people who are my sheroes, you know, Linda Smith and Donna Kerridge and Hini Amaru Ropati, and you know, I got to talk to these beautiful wahine Māori about seed sovereignty, but also too about grief and about how we find the language at this time to pause and to reflect. And in some of the interviews, we talked about the power of writing waiata, writing karakia, even writing pau if we don't want to get too many verses on it. A 3-line pau is good enough. But being able to, because waiata karakia pau are things that we can pass on to the next generation. And I think it's really important that we find some language to language this. Yeah, definitely a much better use of, you know, writing racist haka directed towards Indian people. Sorry, I just really had to say that as well. Because while I'm suggesting that we write pau and waiata, I just also too am very conscious of how haka have just been written to express racism towards the other side of my whakapapa, my Indian side. But let's go back to the tools of our tūpuna to carry our mātauranga, to be able to write and to express ourselves through the kupu at this time. Nothing's more valid than our experience at this time. And I know all of you are working in these very liminal spaces. You know, food is hope for the future. I found myself saying to the Waitangi Tribunal on Monday, asking them if they could really imagine in 100 years what their mokopuna would be eating. Like, could you, like, what would it be? You know, what would it be? What's the supermarket like in 100 years? By crikey. And then I explained to them the only thing that I could imagine, because I can't even really see a supermarket. I have no idea what that food will look like. Too many sci-fi movies. But for those of us that are on whenua, we know that, you know, we know that nature can still produce food in that way. So we have an idea. We have not an idea, we have a knowing that food will be from the soil. It'll be from the trees. Yeah, it'll be vibrant, it'll be mauri rich, it'll contain our whakapapa, it'll come from seeds which we have attached our pūrākau to. And so this is all the work of standing up these new Indigenous food worlds, is so that actually we don't have to imagine food from the supermarket in 100 years' time. The biggest legacy we can leave our mokopuna is healthy soils, vibrant seeds, and the knowingness through their divine Indigenous senses of how to actually grow the food.
A few pārtai from the chat. As a Pākehā and showing the Hua Parakore movie for community twice, there has been much pushback from local Pākehā. How do you get them to embrace the idea, and how do you get mana whenua engaged?
I'm not sure what Hua Parakore movie you're talking about. It might be the Seeds of Unity short film that we shot when we went up to India. Otherwise, if it is just that, maybe get them to watch the 8-part TV series on Hua Parakore, so they have to give up more time than just 10 minutes to jump into our worldview and then express an opinion.
Why are they pushing back?
Yeah, I don't know. Why are they pushing back? Not sure who that question was from.
Hi. The pushback was it was the Happen Films.
Oh, the Happens film.
Yeah, and the first time we showed it, there was a lot of engagement, a lot of positivity. But you know, when we showed it a second time, it just takes one person to view it negatively, and they can kind of poison the whole room. And we're trying to increase food resilience in our community, but I really, really struggle to engage with mana whenua, not for lack of trying. And yeah.
I find that interesting about the Happens films, so thank you for sharing that. I mean, this is, and in terms of engagement with mana whenua, I'm not sure whereabouts you are, Eho, in the motu, but it is always a good idea to maybe connect with Te Waka Kaiora and ask who their māngai are for the rohi that you're in. That might be a way to connect. The other thing to say is that sometimes connections are not happening because it's not the right time. And then the connections will blossom when they happen. And I've seen that so much over the years of this work of Tauiwi wanting to connect with Māori communities. And then just, there's so much that we're involved with that it's hard to prioritise, and there's few people on the ground.
Thank you.
We've got a few more pātai, so I'll go to
Kia ora. I'm sorry to interrupt. Ko Nadine ho. Sorry, I just wanted to jump in there because my pātai kind of comes off the back of that query. Is that okay to just jump in quickly? Oh God, look at everybody's hands up. I'm so sorry. I didn't see that because I'm on my phone. I'll return the rako to you, Ehua.
No, all good. You actually jumped in the chat and said that you had a pātai before they put their hand up. So you go, and then we'll go Matariki, Matt, Grace.
Okay, ka pai. Tēnā koe. Tēnā koe e te tuakana, nā mihi nui ki a koe. My pātai, I'm actually working on a blog at the moment, kind of going through my journey towards zero waste. Zero waste, what I've learned in 10 years, is not a good framing. It's not a good framing for me, and I think a lot of people have difficulties engaging with that because we're measuring ourselves against a yardstick in which you are already failing. Capitalism, the economic systems we live under are actually designed to produce waste. So structurally, we're on the back foot. That language, to go to your point about languaging, is kind of hostile, if not even militant. It feels that way. I know I'm the guy, I'm sure there'll be people in this chat too, who are known as the one who comes around at any whānau thing, sorting the rubbish, you know, and people avoid me. And I've been thinking deeply about what has maintained my connection and my desire and aspiration. One of the things is being around people like yourself and others in the community who are doing awesome things, but it's around the languaging and switching from zero waste to high reverence, like whakapapa, because we value the origin source of things. So I wanted to ask you, for someone who, for solo mum, who that was me for the last 10 years, solo mum, no time, like under so much pressure, living with selfish bloody teenagers who do not do the things. People who have a dietary needs, and everybody in the whānau has to eat different kai. People who are, you know, time is the true wealth, people who have no time. What are some things for those communities that you can say, or what do you do to reassure them, to keep them here, to keep them in this aspiration towards high reverence? Yeah, kia ora.
Oh, Nadine, I love listening to you. Mihi ane te tuihine. I love that reframing, high reverence from zero waste. I love that. That's like leaving that language behind and then standing up this new world. That's a much better sign on our ipu para than kore para, I think, high reverence or whakapapa. I know on the rubbish bin at Tuanango Raukawa, because I'm doing full-time reo at the moment. I've gone and put Papatuanuku on the name on the bin that goes to Papatuanuku, the landfill, because I've been shocked at just how full that gets in a day. yet we're, you know, in karakia and waita and everything else. I think those little acts there, Hoa, exactly what you said, changing our language, knowing that we don't need to be perfect and do everything, and acknowledging everything that we do. It is so hard to push up against the system in our everyday acts of living, especially when you've got kids with different dietary needs. And I mean, my son, even on the weekend, and he's 30, was bloody putting things that could be recycled in the rubbish bin. I'm like, so we're not perfect, and that's all good. That's our human nature. So let's just love it and accept it. The other thing that came to me with your question, Nadine, was love. Ko te aroha te me nui. Ko te aroha te me nui. So we're not going to get there wagging our finger at people. We're going to get there holding our hand out so other people can hold our hand and manifesting a higher vibration of love for Papa Tuanuku and the kaupapa. So, ko te aroha te me nui e hoa, he mihi ana. Ai.
Nā koe. And just in the interest of time, I'll pass to you, Matariki, and then Matt, and then Grace. And that might be all we have time for, e te whānau.
Tēnā koe, e hoa. Tēnā koe, te rangatira. Koai tēnei ko Matariki Makuarea hau. And ko taku pātai ki a koe, what do you think Papa Kāinga need to prioritise right now if we truly want to become, I suppose, or create spaces of Indigenous food and seed sovereignty again, not just like housing developments, because a lot of our housing developments here in Kahungunu, they're everywhere, Papa Kāinga everywhere, but I think not a lot of us are doing, anything about our kai sovereignty, seed sovereignty, our food systems, going back to our Indigenous spaces, etc. So, yeah, give me some tips. I need some awhi because I'm teaching and I'm doing all that I can, educating. I'm doing it on our land, but it just seems like it's hard.
Ai, e mihi ana Matariki he oua te mahi, eh? Okay, here's some quick things. I just scribbled down some bullet points as your question came in. Papa Kāinga is a perfect place to be standing up these new Māori Indigenous foodways, because international research, the work of Vandana Shiva, the work of Papa Whakarito Trust really advocates for small-scale food farming to feed our people again, to feed communities. In fact, small-scale food farming will feed the world, not big corporate agri-food businesses. So that aligns well with the scale of Papa Kāinga. So establishing small-scale huaparakore food farms right in the centre of Papa Kāinga would be an amazing thing to do. I think of Papa Tuanuku Marae. If you haven't been there, go online and have a look. Just on the piece of whenua they've got, that's the size of small scale that I'm thinking of, so you can grow. That's a lot of room to grow a lot of crops, a lot of food. Then there is training that's needed. We need to grow the next generation of huaparakore food farmers. This super worries me. We haven't got... we've got training and education programs in New Zealand for conventional farming, but we haven't got it for huaparakore. Yes, there's a huaparakore program. Yes, there's the Earth Workers program, which is fantastic, lighting up our world of soil and soil microbes, but it's all through Pākehā lenses. So you need to think about training needs for that, and how do you make that a career that our people actually want to do? Food farming, like who's going to grow our food? We need people to grow our food. I find it hard to find Māori in our area to come and work with us to grow food. We really work a lot with Pākehā, Tauiwi, Te Tiriti allies in the Māra doing the ringaropa mahi with us. The other thing is food forests, to think about the development plan and how you can plant food forests in there. So then you're not creating annual food gardens, which need a whole lot of work, but they can, grow food for generations of people. And then, of course, land. One of the things that we've learned from our research is that access to whenua is one of the biggest barriers for food sovereignty. So while people might be in a house on the Papa Kāinga, they still might not have access to land. So, Yeah, those would just be the things off the top of my head. And maybe go down the Huaparakore pathway and see if the Papakainga is interested in getting Huaparakore verified. So then everything in the Papakainga is a Huaparakore way of living, and that would be truly revolutionary. E mihi ana matariki. Kia kaha mō tōpaku mahi e hoa.
Kia ora, Matt.
Tēnā koe whanuma, ko me toko ingoa. I know we're pressed for time, but I just want to encourage this wānanga or summit or workshop to continue because there's so many pātai coming through. I love it. I just want to give a bit of whakapapa. So with Lionel and them, yeah, and Hene Amaru, I'm one of the graduates of that program. I'm now redoing it with Farron Taylor down in Taranaki. And I've, as a chef, I've done from garden to plate to feed the elderly through one of the contracts. And it's not a sustainable thing. It's just a bit of money the government's given to tick the box. But we've been able to reduce social alienation for our whānau, for our karawa and kuikui. Yeah, supermarkets. Well, they seem to claim all of our foods, control our food sources. So unless, like what was said, unless you've got some whenua, you empower yourself with learning to garden, or you have access to putia that you can buy fresh kai. I really feel sometimes these food banks and these bits of scam. It's about educating our people. Emergency food is emergency food. It's not meant to be a lifestyle. And I feel that I had asked these questions around up on graduation. It's not to copy the program, but how can we get it out into our communities? And I did network with, Compost Collective and a few people that I think the names were mentioned, but unless the person is interested, it usually comes down to volunteers, and that be immigrants or old people. The rest of them are either lazy or working. And I think it's about continually educating and just curious around how there may be opportunities to grow, teach our next generation. I feel it really starts in the home. You feed yourself, and then you feed your neighbors, and then, and I've been privileged to meet a few people that are actually doing that, not locally, and even to kind of try and let it land with the iwi or who. A lot of it comes down to people don't want to do it unless they're getting paid, or there are the community garden spaces on the back of, but it just relies on having a plot and somebody going to look after their plot, or just people that are passionate about the whenua and marakai, and not everybody's into it. I think people are very busy, very stressed, and I'm very passionate about food
Thank
sovereignty.
you, Matt. Just getting you to round up your question now, please.
Sorry?
We're reaching the end of the webinar, so could I please get you to round up your question now, please?
Oh, yeah, I'll just stop and let Jessica answer. Thank you.
Oh, kia ora, Matt. Make some really good points in there. I think in terms of food banks, what they do is they still provide a market for commodity colonial foodstuffs. And so it's so problematic in so many ways. When I talk about small-scale Huaparakore food farms, they also do have to be economically viable. We have to be able to pay people a living wage. It's not easy. A lot of small market gardeners are working out how to do that. But this is why networking is so important, so we can understand how those economic models can work. I'm not an advocate for staying in the capitalist system doing that, and so we also too write and advocate for tō utu economies, for re-standing up our original economies of reciprocity and manaakitanga around food is really, really important.
Yes. I find they twisted that word gardener to grower, and that we had produce some really awesome produce, but with the bell curve of, supplying it to overseas wherever it goes, or them selling it back to us, that whole space, that they too are hard done by. The ones that are gaining most is the supermarket. And us as the end user and the grower. I mean, we've got some beautiful, I won't even go into talking about cattle, but we've got some beautiful produce, both from horticulture and agriculture and dairy. Mind you,
Matt, I'm going to actually pass to Grace now. I'm so sorry.
Okay,
I just want to give her the speaking
so another time.
Thank you.
Ka pai.
Kia ora, Grace. This is our last pātai te whānau.
There we go. Can you hear me? I hope I'm using the app right. Oh no. Oh yeah, I am using the app right. I just want to say thank you to Jessica for speaking today. It has been very empowering for me. The timing of this has been quite interesting because it's the first year I've really made an effort to save the seeds around my own garden. And I've been doing that in a way so that I can encourage people to come to our He Mana Tō Kai program that I'll be running in June. My main thing is what sort of training here in Ōtautahi could I take next to develop my skills to help to develop them into the community. And that's about it, really. Big thank you.
Kia ora, Gracie Mahiana. I would suggest connecting up with Te Waka Kaiora and the Māngai or the regional rep in that rohe, definitely staying in this beautiful community of Parakore. And if you haven't already watched the Hua Parakore series on Whakaata Māori on Māori Plus, start to engage with that. You know, reading all of the resources that are out there. Unfortunately, there isn't a place where we all go that's centralized, but I think it's just like this distributed network, which we all find these opportunities to come together in. The other thing, just in rounding up, because I know we're out of time, but my last point, I suppose, that I want to leave with you all is that in standing up these new Indigenous Māori foodways, it's not enough for us just to grow the food, to share the seed and to tend hini ahuoni our soils. If I want to leave you with this one thing in this webinar titled The Death of Colonial Capitalist Patriarchy and the Rise of Mana Wahine, it would be that you need to add the politics to our discourses around food so that we continue to elevate the impacts of colonisation on our food systems, the death of the fracturing of the tauretitanga of the balance, so that we can actually have that critique and that critical awareness coming through into standing up our new food systems. Food without politics is just replicating the colonial system. Yeah. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, nō kuta whawhi ki ta noho kei wainga, i ngā pukinga o Parakore, i tino nui tako aroha mō te kaupapa o Parakore ki a koe Jackie, ka kite a koe ki runga i te zui tupo hoki mō tō puku mahi, tō mahi kai arahi me Tony hoki me Matt aroha nui ki a koutou, ai, tēnā koutou katoa.
Nā koe, Dr. Jessica, it has really been our privilege, no mātou te whiwhi ki te nohotahi ki a koe. Yeah, we're really grateful for this wānanga and also just impressed that you can have no slides and just kōrero to this kaupapa for like an hour. I think that really speaks to your pukinga, your knowledge and decades of research and mahi on the ground. So tēnei o ka mihi. And I just want to read one of the quotes from Moana Jackson, which we published in our pānui yesterday. So many of you may have read it, but I think it's a nice summary to lots of the points that you have talked to today, Jessica. So this is a quote from Moana Jackson from 2021. There was a great African-American thinker called Frederick Douglass who said that power never gives up without a challenge. It never has and it never will. So the change won't necessarily be easy, but what we can do is constantly talk about the need for change, advocate the need for change, and above all, really be brave. Being brave can sound like a difficult thing to do, but I look back in the history of our people, and particularly since 1840, and if there's anything that has marked the survival of our people and the flourishing of our people, it is that we have been brave. And so, yeah, I think that's a lovely summary of all the incredible points that you've brought up today. Jessica, especially thinking about the languaging, two things came out really strongly for me, and that was that the languaging is really important and love is really important. So I'll leave us with that. Thank you all for making the time to join us today. Apologies for going over time and apologies if I was a bit strict. As the facilitator, it is my job to make sure we've got equity of talking time and that we finish relatively on time. So tēnei o ka mihi kia koutou katoa. And I will close us off with karakia. E rua te wānanga kua kitea te aroaro whenua e whirawhira nei. Kia mau ai te mea tata hei pautokotoko mō mātou e manako nei. Kia u, kia mau, kia tīna, haumi e hui e, tai ki e. Mauri ora tātou, ka kite.
Ngā mihi kia
Ka
koutou.
koutou.